Have you ever helped a stranger? Just because you thought it was the right thing to do? No expectation of reward, no hope for anything in return. Just a small gesture, a nod, a smile, a quiet, "Don't worry, I got this." And then you go back to your day like nothing ever happened. But what you didn't know is that one act launched you onto a different path? A turning point no one could predict. In the loud, indifferent heart of Atlanta, where people are too rushed to even make eye contact, there's a little corner store called Brooklyn Market. Humble, unflashy, its flickering sign hasn't been fixed in years. But to Darius Thompson, 27, the cashier behind the counter, it's his entire world. Every day, Darius stands at that register with the same smile. No matter how tired, no matter how high the bills were stacked above his paycheck, no matter how cramped life gets on a cashier's wage, he remembers the names of elderly customers. He asks about their families. He covers a few missing cents when someone comes up short. He isn't wealthy, but he's generous. He isn't powerful, but he always chooses to do the right thing. And on one cold night, with nothing more than a loaf of bread and a carton of milk, Darius changed the course of his life without even realizing it. A man walked into the store, shivering, eyes low, fists clenched around a few coins. He didn't say much, but Darius understood immediately. He paid the difference for the man, just like he'd done for dozens of others. Just another quiet act of kindness. But this one was different, because that man was the CEO of a billion-dollar company. The man with the power to hire or fire tens of thousands. The man who could, quite literally, change Darius's future. But Darius didn't know that. A small gesture, a moment of pure sincerity, a twist of fate that no one saw coming. Stay tuned, because you won't want to miss the moment when Darius's name is spoken in a glass-walled boardroom full of executives, and the stunned expression of a man who had nearly lost faith that decency still existed in the world today. Brooklyn Market wasn't a place people paid much attention to. It wasn't listed among trendy grocery chains, and it didn't have glowing shelves or LED smart signage. But to the people in the neighborhood, it was part of their lives, simple and warm. And it was there that a story would unfold, one that would change a life forever. Darius Thompson, 27, didn't have the kind of inspirational backstory people like to post on LinkedIn. He didn't launch a startup at 16. He didn't graduate from an Ivy League school. He was just a young man behind a cash register, living each day with quiet patience. For 5 years, he was the familiar face at Brooklyn Market, not because he had to be, but because it mattered. He remembered Mrs. Lorraine only drank chamomile tea, one specific brand. He knew Mr. Phillips had a hip replacement and shouldn't carry heavy bags. He noticed when a little boy stared longingly at a candy bar, then lowered his eyes and put it back. Darius hadn't been trained in premium customer experience, but his kindness made people feel seen. He listened, he paid attention, he made people feel human. That night was chilly. Golden leaves blanketed the sidewalk. The front door chimed gently as a man entered. He wore a worn-out coat. A beanie was pulled low, covering most of his face. He didn't speak, didn't make eye contact. He moved through the aisles like someone silently weighing his hunger against his wallet. Darius had seen this before, but somehow it always slowed his heartbeat just a little. The man picked out 3 items: a loaf of bread, a small carton of milk, a protein bar, the cheapest one. At the register, he pulled out a crumpled $5 bill and a few coins. Darius did the math. 92 cents short. The man looked down. I'll put the bar back." Darius didn't ask questions. He didn't make a show. He simply rang everything up, pushed the bag across the counter, and said gently, "It's okay. We all come up short sometimes." The man froze. In his eyes was something more than surprise. There was disbelief, gratitude, a quiet ache, like someone so used to being ignored They'd forgotten what simple kindness felt like. He clutched the bag like it carried more than groceries. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." Darius smiled, not thinking twice. "Hope you have a warm night, sir." The moment the man stepped out of the store, everything seemed to return to normal. The door chimed softly. A breeze fluttered the plastic curtain at the exit. Darius went back to work, just like always, completely unaware that he had just opened a door to a whole new journey, because that man wasn't just anybody. He was Nathaniel Carter, the elusive CEO of Carter Retail Group, a national retail empire with over 2,000 stores across the country. And tonight, he didn't walk in to inspect the place, nor to conduct market research. He simply wanted to see, one last time, if the human values his company once stood for still existed. What he didn't expect was to find the answer in someone with no title, no power, no hidden agenda, just a kind heart. A silver-gray sedan sat quietly across the street from Brooklyn Market. Inside, the glow from the streetlights danced across the windows. On the passenger seat rested a brown paper bag, still holding the loaf of bread, the milk, and the protein bar. 3 simple items that had somehow shaken Nathaniel Carter to his core. He didn't start the engine. He just sat there, quietly turning a small receipt in his hands. His eyes stopped at the faded text printed across the bottom. Darius T., 8:43 p.m. Nathaniel had thought he'd seen it all. He ran a billion-dollar empire, thousands of stores, tens of thousands of employees. He knew numbers, reports, projections. He could read a balance sheet like poetry. But tonight, a single act of kindness from a stranger had jolted him awake from what felt like a long slumber. Why did he do it? The question looped in Nathaniel's mind. No one knew who he was. There were no hidden cameras, no stunts, no reason to earn points. And yet, over less than $1 in change, Darius paid the rest. No hesitation, no judgment, no condescension when faced with an old, weathered man in ragged clothes. Just help. Something Nathaniel, once a man who'd clawed his way up from zero, had somehow forgotten along the way. Once upon a time, he too stood behind a register like Darius. At 17, he worked part-time at a small grocery store in the suburbs. The uniform never fit right. Customers often didn't bother to look him in the eye. But on some days, a kind word from a shopper was enough to make him feel the day was worth it. Then came college. Startups, growth, recognition, and step by step, Nathaniel walked away from that young version of himself. From those small, honest feelings, he exhaled. A faint cloud fogged the car window. Nathaniel looked across the street at Brooklyn Market, this little shop he'd never once noticed on any of his market share reports. It wasn't part of the Carter chain. It wasn't flagged in any growth strategy. It was just a family-run store tucked between city buildings, and yet, it held something his entire empire had lost: a heart. In recent years, he'd heard the murmurs. Employees felt drained. Store managers treated staff poorly. Customers are abandoned by rigid policies. Wages are stagnant while KPIs are tightened. Each time, his advisors offered the usual remedies: launch an audit team, send out anonymous surveys, add a new perks policy. But not once had he gone down there himself. Until tonight. Nathaniel opened the glove box and pulled out a leather notebook. The first page listed stores under the performance review. The next had meetings he'd skipped. He flipped to a blank page and wrote one name: Darius Thompson. How many like him have we overlooked? He didn't know why, but he felt compelled to return, to observe more. Not as a CEO, not as a man of influence, but as someone trying to rediscover the soul of the empire he had built, an empire that once stood for something. But now, had become a machine of spreadsheets and empty slogans. A new day. The air was crisp, heavy with the damp scent left behind by last night's rain. A long coat masked the man's face as he stood quietly outside the Brooklyn market. Nathaniel Carter had come back, just like he said he would. But this time, not to be helped. This time, to see the truth for himself. The small grocery store was just as peaceful as before. The bell chimed gently as the door opened. The scent of cheap coffee mixed with floor cleaner hung in the air. Darius was behind the counter, offering a soft smile to an elderly woman counting her loose change. Nathaniel waited, unnoticed. Just another face in the store. He quietly watched each movement. Darius was exactly the same as he had been the night before, calm, patient, unpretentious. A quiet worker doing a job that most executives wouldn't begin to understand. A young man approached the register with a packet of noodles, his eyes darting nervously. Nathaniel noticed how Darius subtly slid a small snack item off the total, letting it pass unpaid. The boy mumbled a thank you. Darius nodded. Next time, make sure you get something that'll actually fill you up. A small act, a kindness given without a camera. Then, the door chimed again. But this time, it wasn't an ordinary customer. A man in a cheap suit walked in, hair slicked back, posture loud and arrogant. The kind of mid-tier manager companies love to parade around for show. The kind who bullies subordinates and flatters the boardroom. He marched straight to the counter. No greeting, no acknowledgement of the line, just entitlement. Darius remained composed. "Good morning, Mr. Lively. How can I help you today?" The man smirked, pulling a crumpled sheet of paper from his coat. "New directive from upstairs. Everyone here is having their quarterly bonus frozen." Darius hesitated, his fingers lightly gripping the counter. But he nodded. "Understood, sir." Nathaniel stood frozen. Bonus freeze, no warning, no explanation, and the way Lively said it, like he was granting a favor. "You're lucky," Lively added. "You're not like the rest of them, always trying to start something." The rest of them. The words cut through the room like a blade. Darius stayed quiet, just a small tightening of the fist. No protest, no frown. Only a deep breath swallowing the anger. Lively turned and walked away with a flick of his wrist. "I'm just here to deliver the message. No need to get dramatic." Nathaniel felt his blood boil. He had seen injustice before. But something about this, watching someone like Darius get stepped on, lit a fire in him he hadn't felt in years. Darius carefully folded the paper and placed it in the drawer, then went back to work like nothing happened. Nathaniel stood still, his heart pounding. He said nothing. He didn't step in because he knew if something needed to change, it had to change from the root. That night, Nathaniel couldn't sleep. He sat at the window of his luxurious penthouse, staring at the blinking lights of the city below, a sprawling machine of capitalism he had helped create. But now, it felt like that machine was rotting from within. In his mind, Lively's voice echoed like poison. Some people don't know when to stop. No bonuses, no reason. Just delivering the message, don't make it a big deal. Not this time. Nathaniel stood, walked to his desk, and powered up his computer. He accessed the highest-level internal dashboard. Hundreds of reports filled the screen. Payroll data, HR complaints, turnover rates, rejected raise requests. One chart blinked. Downtown Atlanta branch, the highest denial rate for raises across the entire system. Below it, dozens of requests are marked, denied, performance metrics not met. But it didn't take long for Nathaniel to realize the numbers weren't the problem. The mindset was. They had stopped seeing people, started seeing costs. The next morning, the entire Carter Retail Group Executive Board was summoned. No one knew why, But the moment they walked into the conference room, the air was already heavy. Nathaniel stood at the head of the table. No tie. No flash. Just fire in his eyes. "We need to talk," he began, voice steady. "About an employee at Brooklyn Market." The room stirred. One CFO cleared his throat. "Sir, I thought Brooklyn Market wasn't part of our chain." Nathaniel gave a cold smile. "Exactly. And that's precisely why that employee showed me what we've been missing." He turned on the projector. On the screen appeared internal reports, HR complaints, payroll records, all stopping at one name, Darius Thompson. 3 consecutive raise requests denied. Reason: did not meet performance KPIs. Evaluator: lively. Regional manager. The sound of Nathaniel's hands slamming the table echoed like a thunderclap. "Not enough performance," he growled. "This man remembers every customer's name, helps those who come up short, and restores dignity to an entire neighborhood. Meanwhile, your so-called managers walk in and humiliate people like tyrants in pressed shirts." He scanned the room, gaze sharp as X-rays slicing through every excuse, every polished resume. "I want to know, how many people like Darius have you buried under the label cost optimization? How many human beings have been reduced to cells in a spreadsheet, then erased with one click? And how many livelies are still sitting in management, just because they know how to say the right thing to the right boss?" No one answered. No one met his eyes. Nathaniel exhaled slowly, then pulled out a document. "In the next 24 hours, I want a report from every division with the following: raise rejection rates, managers with the most complaints, employee satisfaction metrics, and especially, who signed off on every one of those rejections?" A nervous HR executive spoke up. "Sir, are you planning to purge the system?" Nathaniel nodded, calm and resolute. "I'm done patching cracks. I'm tearing out the rot and rebuilding from the ground up." His eyes gleamed with something fierce and final. "And I'm starting by giving Darius the position he deserves, not just as a model employee, but as the compass for how we treat human beings." That afternoon, in West Atlanta, the wind cut through the alleyways like razors. Brooklyn Market glowed quietly, like always. Inside, Darius was restocking shelves, his hands labeling flour bags while echoes of Lively's words still circled in his mind. "No raise. Some people like you don't know when to stop," he smirked. Not angry, just tired. But even so, he stood at the register like every day, smiling, thanking customers, even though the soles of his shoes were beginning to split. Then the bell rang. That familiar jingle. Darius looked up. The man he had helped the night before, the man who had seemed down on his luck, was back. But this time, he wasn't dressed like someone in need. He wore a tailored wool coat, a handcrafted tie, and carried the calm force of a man bringing a storm. Nathaniel Carter stepped forward, no longer hiding. He placed a thick, embossed business card on the counter. Nathaniel Carter, CEO, Carter Retail Group. Darius looked at the card, then up at the man. "So that night, you were not a man down on his luck," Nathaniel interrupted. His tone wasn't cold, but it wasn't boastful either. "But I was once hungry, and you helped me, without needing to know who I was." Darius said nothing. The world seemed to pause for just a moment. Nathaniel's gaze turned serious. "You know what, Darius? Your kindness woke me up from a numbness I didn't even realize I was living in." He pulled out a folder, placed it gently on the counter. "I want to offer you a position, directly at headquarters. Title: Director of People and Community Development." The room stood still. Darius blinked. "I do what, exactly?" "What you've always done here, but at scale. Observe people. Help us build better policies. Advocate for those creating real value in the quietest ways." Darius didn't answer immediately. He looked around the store he'd called home for 5 years, full of ordinary moments that had become extraordinary in his memory. I don't have a fancy degree, he said hesitantly. I've never been a manager. I'm just a cashier. Nathaniel smiled. I don't need someone who learned people from books. I need someone who's been one of them. He stood, adjusting his coat. You don't have to answer now, but if you say yes, there will be a plaque in my office that says, "We forgot what it meant to care," he reminded us. Darius held the folder tightly. No words were spoken. Just a look, between a man who nearly lost everything and another who reminded him why he started. As Nathaniel walked out the door, the wind howled outside. But what stirred inside Darius wasn't the wind. It was the unmistakable shift of a life beginning a whole new chapter. 3 days had passed since that fateful night. 3 days of restless sleep for Darius. He stared at the business card on his table as if it were a portal, one that could open into a new world or pull him away from everything familiar. Brooklyn, market still ran as usual. The doorbell chimed with every customer. The air still carried the scent of flour and burnt coffee, and the greetings were as warm and familiar as ever. But Darius was no longer the same. In the corner of the counter sat a thank you letter from an elderly woman, with trembling handwriting, but full of warmth. Beside it, a small donation box he had placed last year to help a local deliveryman after an accident. Every inch of the store whispered stories, and Darius was part of them all. To say yes, or to say no. On one side was the place he'd called home for 5 years, humble, intimate, but tight and unfair. On the other, a chance to touch hundreds, thousands of lives like his. But this time, with a voice that carried weight, with the power to change things. He'd never been one to chase grand visions. But this time, Darius knew he had to think bigger than himself. That afternoon, he wrote an email. Subject, "I'm ready." He hit send. Minutes later, his phone buzzed. It was Nathaniel. His voice was soft, steady. "Welcome to my team, Darius." The following week, Darius arrived at Carter Retail Group headquarters. He wore a neatly pressed shirt, but his signature gentle smile remained untouched. Glass towers. An elevator that soared to the 30th floor. A conference room bathed in white light. It was overwhelming, just a little. Then the door opened. Ahead was a long table. More than a dozen people waited. HR directors, operations heads, PR leads, all of whom had heard about him. Nathaniel stood and introduced him. "This is Darius Thompson. He's here to help reshape how we treat people. Not from theory, but from lived truth." In his first meeting, Darius didn't open a report. He told a story of an old woman counting coins to buy bread, of a young man collapsing from too many shifts, of himself, who once felt grateful just to be seen without judgment. The room went silent. No one challenged him, because none of them had lived it like he had. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair and smiled. That was the beginning. The first wave of changes, a full audit of compensation and promotion practices system-wide. A confidential, internal hotline for anonymous staff feedback. Each location is to elect a listener, a true representative chosen by peers. And most importantly, the launch of the Human Kindness Fund for emergency support to employees in need, and the very first person to oversee it. Darius' internal bulletins carried the update, with one line printed in bold. A strong system is one that listens, and now we're listening to those who truly know. That evening, Darius sat alone in his new office. The city lights flickered through the glass. His coffee had gone cold, but something inside him had never been warmer. Because for the first time, the voice of someone small was not only heard, it echoed. 12 months had passed. Since the night Nathaniel Carter walked into Brooklyn Market with a crumpled paper bag and a heavy heart. Now, Carter Retail Group, with more than 600 stores across the country, operated under a philosophy never written into a corporate playbook before. Kindness is the foundation. In a suburban store outside Seattle, a new employee named Linda, a single mother of two, finished her shift and was called aside by her manager. Not to be reprimanded about KPIs, but to receive a grant to help pay for her children's school, funded by the Human Kindness Fund. Linda wept, not because of the money, but because it was the first time in her entire working life she didn't feel invisible. In a Chicago branch, a young Latino employee, once too shy to speak up due to a language barrier, was now the store's employee representative, delivering suggestions directly to management. No more side eyes, no more dismissals, just respect. At headquarters, Darius sat in a quarterly meeting with the executive board. This time, no one interrupted him. He presented a new initiative. 1 year, 1 story. A company-wide program spotlighting the kindest acts from employees across all locations. Each quarter, the most compassionate employee would not only receive recognition, but a seat at the policy-making table. They would be heard, and they would help lead. That night, inside the familiar office of Nathaniel Carter, he sat quietly, the soft amber glow of his desk lamp casting long shadows over the wrinkles that time had gently drawn on his face. On his desk stood a framed photo. Darius, in a crisp white shirt, was with his arm around a beaming elderly woman inside a supermarket. In the corner of the picture, a small line was printed. "I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because it was the right thing to do." Nathaniel set his coffee mug down, and with a slow nod, he offered a silent thank you, not through words, but through a rebuilt empire, one that now stood on the foundation of empathy. Then, the world started watching. Major news outlets began to take notice. Carter Retail Group was hailed as America's first human-centered chain. Forbes magazine ran a feature. From cold metrics to warm souls, the story of CEO Nathaniel Carter and the flamekeeper Darius Thompson. And then, a handwritten letter arrived. From Brooklyn Market, the humble store where it all began. The penmanship was shaky, but full of grace. "Darius, every time you come home, don't forget to say hi to Grandma Lorraine. She still drinks the same chamomile tea, the one you always remembered." Darius smiled softly as he read it. No one had to say it aloud, but everyone knew. Some people quietly do what's right, and the world bends to follow them. A small act like paying for a stranger's groceries may seem insignificant, but sometimes it's the beginning of a revolution. In a world growing colder by the day, there are still those who stand quietly in the current, still smiling, still kind, and with that alone, they shake empires. If you've ever felt that your effort is too small to be seen, remember, every great fire began with just one spark. You're watching When Kindness Becomes Power. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, so you never miss a story that might just change how you see the world and yourself.